key wasn't working. I watched from the shadows of the tall pine trees at the edge of my property, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. On the porch of my own cabin, my cabin, stood Brenda, the president of our Homeowners Association. And she was trying to unlock my front door. She was flanked by a well-dressed, affluent-looking couple who were starting to look impatient and confused. Brenda's face, which had been a mask of breezy, real estate confidence, was now beginning to flush a deep, embarrassed red as she jiggled the key in the lock with increasing frustration. The mountain air. She said to the couple with a tight, forced laugh, "It can make the locks a little sticky." Just a moment. She had no idea that the locks weren't sticky. They were brand new. I had had them changed less than an hour ago. She also had no idea that I was standing 20 feet away, watching her, my phone silently recording the entire beautiful, glorious train wreck. She fumbled with the key one last time, a pathetic, desperate little rattle, before finally giving up. She turned to the couple, her perfect smile, now a brittle, cracking facade. And in that moment, I decided to make my entrance. I stepped out from behind the trees and walked calmly up my own gravel path. "Having some trouble there, Brenda?" I asked, my voice polite, but with an edge of pure cold steel. She spun around, her eyes going wide with a mixture of shock, fury, and dawning catastrophic horror. She had thought I was 100 miles away, back in the city. She had thought she had won. That's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe. 2 HOA files. To understand that moment of beautiful karmic justice, you have to understand my parents. In the little A-frame cabin they loved more than anywhere on earth. My name is Sarah. I'm a graphic designer, a quiet, creative person who spends my days in front of a computer screen. My world is one of color palettes, fonts, and the clean, orderly logic of design. Last year, I lost both of my parents in a tragic car accident. My world was shattered. They left me their one and only real asset, their beloved little vacation cabin in the mountain community of Aspen Glen. That cabin was the backdrop to every happy memory of my childhood. It was a place of warmth, of laughter, of the smell of pine needles and my dad's pancakes. It was my sanctuary. After the funeral, I knew I couldn't bear to sell it. Not yet. I decided I would use it as a part-time retreat. A place to grieve, to heal, and to work remotely, surrounded by the quiet beauty that my parents had cherished. The ruler of this quiet mountain kingdom, however, was a woman who had no appreciation for sentiment. Her name was Brenda, the president of the Aspen Glen HOA, and as I would soon learn, the community's self-proclaimed top real estate agent. My first interaction with her was a week after the funeral, when I had come up to the cabin to just be. She showed up at my door, not with a casserole or a card of condolence, but with a thick, glossy real estate brochure and her business card. "Sarah," she'd said, her voice a symphony of fake, rehearsed sympathy. "I was so devastated to hear about your parents. They were fixtures. Oh, I know this is a difficult time, but the market up here is just white hot. A vintage A-frame like this, with a little professional staging, it could fetch a remarkable price. Lot of upkeep for a single girl. When you're ready to sell, you call me. I know this market better than anyone. It's what I do." I was stunned. I was standing there, my eyes red from crying, my heart a raw, open wound. And she was giving me a sales pitch. "Thank you, Brenda," I'd managed to say, my voice tight. "But I'm not selling. The cabin is staying in the family." The fake sympathy on her face vanished, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Of a predator whose easy meal had just shown an unexpected sign of life. "Of course, dear," she said. "But you'll find that maintaining a property in an HOA community like ours is a very demanding responsibility. We have very high standards." It was a threat, wrapped in a condescending smile. The war began. A month later, I was using the cabin on weekends, spending my weeks back in the city at my apartment. My first weekend back, Brenda came over. She didn't knock. She just appeared on my deck while I was reading. She started pointing out all the things that were now out of compliance. My welcome mat, a simple, rustic thing my mother had woven, was a non-approved material. The faded forest green paint on the trim was an unauthorized color. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with a kind of predatory helpfulness, "a lot of these minor compliance issues can be deferred by the board if a property is actively on the market. It would make things so much simpler for you while you're grieving." It was a veiled threat and a sales pitch, all rolled into one. "The cabin is not for sale, Brenda," I said, my voice cold. "We'll see." She smirked and walked away. The fine started the next week, notice was taped to my door. A $200 fine for failure to maintain consistent full-time occupancy. I stared at the paper in disbelief. They were fining me for not living in my own vacation cabin enough. It was a completely insane, made-up rule, a bylaw. I could find nowhere in the official HOA documents. It was a pure fabrication, a tool of harassment. I was in the city during the week, and my anxiety began to grow. What was she doing when I wasn't there? I called my nearest full-time neighbor, a kind, elderly man named Mr. Henderson. "Sarah," he said, his voice hesitant.
"Oh,
"Strange. I see Brenda's car at your place sometimes during the week, and I saw her on your porch the other day, with a man I didn't recognize." My blood ran cold. She was trespassing. She was showing my property, and then the call that blew the whole thing wide open. It was Mr. Henderson again, and he was furious on my behalf. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling with anger, "you're not going to believe this. I was on the computer, just looking at local real estate listings for my daughter, and I found your cabin. It's for sale. There's an online listing. Your address, photos of the inside. Everything. The listing agent is Brenda." The shock and the rage that surged through me were so intense I felt dizzy. I fumbled with my laptop, my hands shaking, and there it was, my home, a private sacred sanctuary, listed for all the world to see. The description was a masterpiece of insulting prose, quaint, rustic fixer-upper, perfect for a buyer with vision. Blank canvas, waiting for a modern touch, motivated seller. I immediately called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice cheerful and professional. "Brenda, what the hell is this?" I screamed, my carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. "We have listed my home for sale, without my permission." Didn't even have the decency to sound surprised. "Oh, hello, Sarah," she said, her voice calm and condescending. "Was just helping you out, dear. It's a hot market. And as I've explained, the community really needs a responsible, full-time owner in that cabin to bring it up to our standards. I was just being proactive, solving the problem for everyone. I already have several very interested buyers who are ready to make a cash offer." She was so delusional, so completely lost in her own world of entitlement, that she genuinely believed she was doing me a favor. She believed she had the right to sell my home out from under me. "You take that listing down right now," I said, my voice a low growl, "or you will be hearing from my lawyer." I had my lawyer send a blistering cease and desist letter that same day, demanding the immediate removal of the fraudulent listing and warning her that she was committing real estate fraud, a crime that could cost her her license. The next day, the listing vanished. I felt a wave of relief. I had one. I'd stopped her. Or so I thought. That Friday, I drove up to the cabin, planning to spend a quiet weekend. As I turned onto my street, my heart sank. There was Brenda's white SUV parked in front of my house, and another unfamiliar car parked behind it. I pulled up just in time to see Brenda on my porch, with a well-dressed, affluent-looking couple, fumbling with a key at my front door. The key she must have had copied from the spare my parents used to leave with a neighbor. She wasn't just listing my house. She was actively, physically trying to show it. And that brings us back to that moment, me stepping out of the shadows. Brenda, spinning around, her face a mask of pure, catastrophic horror. The well-dressed couple staring at me, then at her, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning anger. "Having some trouble there, Brenda?" I asked again, my voice dripping, with an icy calm I didn't know I possessed. "Sarah." She stammered, her face flushing a deep, ugly red. We. These are the Petersons. They were just so in love with the cabin from the online pictures. I was just showing them the porch. The man, Mr. Peterson, stepped forward, his face a thundercloud. "Is this woman your real estate agent, ma'am?" he asked me. "No, sir," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "She is not. In fact, this cabin is not, and has never been for sale. I believe you have been the victim of a fraudulent listing." "And this woman," I said, turning my gaze to an out-rambling Brenda, "is a trespasser and a criminal." Ow. Petersons were horrified. They apologized profusely to me, shot Brenda a look of pure, unadulterated disgust, and left. Brenda was left standing on my porch, her face a ruin. But her terror quickly morphed back into her default setting, rage. "You will regret this," she shrieked as I stood by my front door. "I will ruin you. I will have the HOA foreclose on this cabin for all your unpaid fines. You will be out on the street. This is my town, my community. You have made a very, very powerful enemy." She stormed off, leaving me shaken, but with a new, hard resolve forming in my heart. The war was not over, but the next battle would be fought on my terms. That night, my grief and fear finally burned away, leaving behind a cold, clear, and creative fury. I was a graphic designer. I created brands. I built narratives she wanted to play games with. Signs and listings. Fine. I was going to design the masterpiece of my career. I spent the next day on my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I made a few phone calls, one to a locksmith, one to a local high-end sign printing company, and one to my lawyer. The next Friday, I drove up to the cabin early. I had the locksmith change every single lock on the property. The old simple locks were replaced with heavy-duty, unpickable deadbolts. The key Brenda had copied was now a useless piece of metal, and then the sign was delivered. Brenda, true to her insane, delusional word, had actually scheduled a full-blown open house for my cabin for that Saturday. She had advertised it all over the community, on social media, in the local paper. She was determined to sell my house, whether I liked it or not. At noon on Saturday, the first of the prospective buyers began to arrive. A line of expensive cars started making its way down my street. But as they pulled up to my cabin, they were met with a sight that stopped them dead in their tracks. The lockbox that Brenda had defiantly placed on my doorknob was gone. And on the front lawn, where a professional for sale sign should have been, was my own creation. A massive, beautiful, and absolutely devastating sign. It was designed to look exactly like a high-end luxury real estate sign. At the top, in huge, elegant letters, it said, "For sale." Below that was a large, professionally shot and deeply unflattering picture of Brenda, taken from my security camera footage of her trespassing on my porch, and below her picture, the text read, "THIS historic cabin is not and has never been for sale. However, the real estate agent who fraudulently listed IT Brenda Miller of Brenda Buys and Sells is the subject of a forthcoming ethics complaint to the National Association of Realtors and a civil lawsuit for fraud, trespassing, an intentional infliction of emotional distress. She is also the president of a Homeowners Association currently under investigation for illegal harassment and financial malfeasance." And at the very bottom, a final, beautiful touch, a large QR code, the open house attendees. A collection of wealthy, curious locals were getting out of their cars, staring at the sign. They were pulling out their phones. They were scanning the QR code, and that QR code linked to a simple, elegant website I had designed the night before. A website that contained screenshots of Brenda's threatening emails, linked to the now defunct but still cached fraudulent real estate listing. And best of all, the full, high-definition security camera footage of her attempting to break into my house with the Petersons, and her subsequent unhinged screaming meltdown. The humiliation was absolute. It was public. And thanks to the internet, it was permanent. Brenda, who had arrived in her white SUV, ready to play the role of the master real estate agent, could only sit in her car and watch as her entire professional and social world was dismantled. One smartphone scan, At a time, the aftermath was a beautiful, glorious bonfire of her life. The National Association of Realtors launched a full investigation. Her brokerage fired her. She was facing a massive lawsuit from me, and I later learned from the Petersons as well. The HOA board, terrified of being named as co-conspirators, in my lawsuit held an emergency meeting and unanimously voted her out of the presidency. This whole insane, painful, and ultimately triumphant journey taught me a powerful lesson. People who are blinded by greed and entitlement see the world and the people in it as mere commodities, as objects to be used and discarded for their own benefit. Brenda saw my family's cabin not as a home filled with a lifetime of priceless memories, but as a quick and easy commission check just waiting to be cashed. She tried to write her own story for my house, a story that ended with her name on a sign and a check in her pocket. So I used my own skills, the quiet tools of my own trade, to design her a brand new ending, an ending she would never ever forget. Brenda's real estate license was permanently revoked, and she and her husband sold their house and moved away in the dead of night. But her brother-in-law, a notoriously aggressive developer, was just appointed to the county's Planning and Zoning Commission. And he's just proposed a full review of all part-time occupancy and historic properties in our area, citing concerns about community development and modernization.